Your interpretation.
Hello, I'm Adrian Goldberg. Thank you for downloading the 5 Live Investigates podcast. Tonight, how the squeezed middle classes are renting out their spare rooms to drug dealers for the cultivation of cannabis. Hello, I'm Adrian Goldberg. You will have heard, I'm sure, about houses turned over to cannabis farming and how the police can spot them by flying overhead and using heat-seeking thermal imaging to detect the growers. Well, on 5 Live Investigates tonight, we can reveal a whole new trend as the criminals have adapted to escape detection. Now they're targeting the leafy residential streets of suburbia, where hard-pressed homeowners are renting out their spare rooms to the dealers, or even becoming suppliers themselves. It's members of the squeezed middle classes who are helping the trade in cannabis to flourish. Growers and dealers will be telling us their stories. And of course, we want to hear yours as well. Does this go on in your street? Have you turned to cannabis farming yourself to get through these hard times? Drop me a text to 85058, email goldberg@bbc.co.uk, or tweet at BBC5Live on Twitter. In the course of this investigation, I was put in touch with a drug dealer from the West Midlands. He told me that after police got wise to cannabis growing on inner city estates, he's diversified his business and now asks his middle-class clients if they're willing to rent out a spare room to grow cannabis. He says that with so many people feeling the pinch, he has no shortage of takers. We've used an actor to voice his words.
I've got a couple going at the moment. What I used to do was in dodgy areas, but it's a bit hot now, if you know what I mean.
That there's police action.
Yeah, and people generally know that if you're in and out of a house in half an hour and nobody's living in the house, I mean, people aren't thick out there. They think there's something going on, don't they? I mean, I've had a couple that have been taken, so since then I've moved on to different areas, quieter areas.
So you say that cannabis is grown in rooms then, in ordinary suburban streets?
Yeah.
Who are the people that own and rent these houses? Do you have an agreement with them where they'll rent you a room and allow you to grow cannabis in their rooms?
Yes, generally I've got a lot of clients that I sell weed to now who are middle class people. If I mention to them that they can make 2-3 grand in 10 weeks, they'll say what for, and I'll say I need to borrow a room. I mean, I know a couple of people who live in the houses. One lad has got a very good IT job, but what he earns in a month, he could make that in 8 weeks, so he said he'll do it.
So how much would you give him for growing cannabis in one of his rooms?
Well, generally varies from house to house, but this guy, because it was a pretty big room and I could get a lot of plants in there, I gave him 3 grand and he was happy with that for 8, 9, maybe 10 weeks for using the room. And after everything was done, the room would be back to however it was when he gave it to me.
So you'd only be renting the room and growing the cannabis for a short period?
Yeah, he'd give me a set of keys and I'd generally phone him to tell him when I'd be popping down. Sometimes he'd be there. I'd try to do it when he was in work so I wouldn't disturb him, and he didn't have a problem with it.
And that would be one crop, one growth site?
Yeah, and he's passed me on to a couple of his friends now who are interested. Obviously they're thinking that 3 grand for 10 weeks work isn't bad at all.
You mentioned that one of your growers was an IT consultant, already quite well paid in his day job. How common is it that people are growing cannabis for you that are in those kind of jobs?
Most of the people that do this for me now have all got jobs. They're genuinely good people. I mean, if you saw him on the street, you'd never think he's got anything to do with anything illegal. I don't think he's been arrested or done for anything in his life anyway, so I was a bit shocked. I've been for a drink with him a couple of times and I happened to mention it and he was fine with it. I was a bit wary at first, thinking he's a bit, but he's passed me on to a couple of other people who are interested. So, like I said, if you saw him on the street, you'd never think he had anything to do with weed.
So you're seeing a movement perhaps towards people who might be considered middle class or regular citizens who are quite happily doing well-paid day jobs, but also growing cannabis on the side and earning themselves a few £1,000.
Yeah. I mean, from one room you could probably make up to £20,000. I mean, he's seen what I've been doing now and he's thinking of doing one for himself anyway after I've left.
Setting up his own little cannabis growing factory.
He's got his own place. It's nice, quiet little street. He knows everybody in the street. He's got a nice car, nice paid job. They wouldn't even think he'd be doing anything like that in the house.
So that's a drug dealer from the West Midlands, and if you're thinking, that's all talk, well, let me tell you, in the course of this investigation, I also met a middle-class professional woman from the northwest of England who's turned over one of the rooms in her house to cannabis farming. Well-spoken, with designer jeans and sunglasses perched on her head, she was, in supermarket terms, definitely more Waitrose than Lidl. And she told me that she believed her upmarket lifestyle helped her escape detection because she wasn't viewed by the police as suspicious. And here's one listener who got in touch after hearing us trail this story on 5 Live Breakfast on Friday.
Well, I'm on the force, I'm early 40s, ex-forces, I'm an IT professional, and I grow cannabis for a hobby and for profit.
Tell me about the profit side of it.
Well, what would you like to know? How much?
How much and how easy it is to get into that world.
Incredibly easy to get into that world, and I'm personally doing about 3,500 to 4,000 every 7 weeks.
3,500 to 4,000 pounds.
Yes.
That's how much you make.
Yes.
And how do you sell on the cannabis that you grow?
Well, you get in touch with a dealer. You put your ear about, you'll find one. You pass it on that you've got some for sale. He's straight away, he will either have it off you or he'll put you in touch with someone that wants to buy.
To the outside world, how would you look? Would you be a classic, respectable, upstanding middle-class citizen?
Shirt and tie, suit, most times, driving around in a company car.
And how do you feel about the fact that you are now caught up in a criminal underworld and doing things which are illegal?
2 years ago I wouldn't have considered it. But because of the way of the world now, it's the only option left for some people. If you go out and earn money fairly, the government just take it off you in tax. They take enough money under the counter. Now it's our turn.
And in terms of the space that it takes up in your house, how intrusive is it? Would people spot it when they came to your house?
Wouldn't know it's here.
Where is it then?
I've got it in the utility room, and I've got a separate unit, which is like a stealth unit, which looks like a bookcase. But it's a false door.
The fact that you are a middle-class, professional person living in a pleasant suburb then, do you think that gives you a kind of protection that you wouldn't have?
Absolutely. You're off the radar.
At the end of the day, though, you are a criminal.
Yes, I know.
How do you feel about that?
Absolutely no feelings about that whatsoever.
So that's a 5 Live listener who contacted the programme and fits perfectly the new trend of the middle-class cannabis farmer. And during the course of our investigation, we've also come to hear about a college lecturer who rented out his room to a dealer to cultivate the drug when he thought he was going to be made redundant. And then there's this guy from the Black Country who told me how when he lost his job just over a year ago, he rented out his spare room for cannabis farming. He's in his mid-30s, is a father of school-aged children, and he was happy to break the law to help his family get through hard times. Again, an actor voices his words.
I rent out a room to a friend, and he does what he does.
And what is that he does?
Sets his things up. I'm not sure how he grows it, but he puts his lights in, sets his pots up and tends to it.
Grows cannabis?
Yeah.
And how did he approach you?
Just through family and through friends. I just said he wanted to rent a room, and after he named a price. And at the time I did need the money, so I went along with it and never had a problem.
Did he offer you good money?
Yeah. It's £2,000 for every 8 to 10 weeks.
And that's more than you'd get for renting it out to a lodger?
Yeah. He covered the electric bill as well, which was a few £100 on top of the normal bill.
And when he did that, did he tell you that it was cannabis that he was growing?
Yeah, he told me before.
And you didn't have a problem with that, given that it's illegal?
No.
Why not?
I needed the money at the time. It was quiet. It never bothered no one, never made a noise. The missus knew and tolerated it for about 6 months until the finances were back to normal. Then he moved on. I told him, you've done what you've got to do. And he moved on.
In that time when you had it in your house, were you worried about getting busted?
We were always worried about getting busted, but he's very discreet, you see. And being a family house, the police and the neighbours, they don't suspect. All he was a friend coming to the house every other day. Nobody knew. Or they thought he was just coming around for a cup of tea.
But you're a family man with a job.
Yeah, but at that time I was struggling. I mean, I'm all right now. Works good. Everything is good. But at that time, I was struggling, and he did help me out.
Do you know other people doing the same thing?
Yeah,
How many?
quite a few. All you need is a little room. Who else is going to give me £2 every 8 to 10 weeks? You know, everyone's got money problems.
And that's one of the squeezed middle classes turning to cannabis farming by renting out his room to a drug dealer. Coming up, if middle class Britain is going to pot, what are the police doing about it? We'll have the answers and your reaction to this shortly. Gary, I want to bring in at this point to DCI Martin Hercombe from West Midlands Police, where the drug dealer we've been spoken to operates. Good evening to you, Martin.
Good evening, Adrian.
So, has this phenomenon that we've identified tonight started coming through yet in terms of convictions? Because the criminals and the growers seem to think that they are still at the moment one step ahead of the law.
The answer to your question, first of all, is no. I would agree. Well, first of all, very concerning to hear what I have this evening. Clearly a new trend, but one which people need to understand in terms of the seriousness. It does carry a maximum sentence of 14 years imprisonment, and for even those that may be first-time offenders. I've had a good look at the sentencing guidelines today for just these very circumstances, and you are still looking at 18 months to 3 years, depending on specific circumstances. So, not to be trivialised whatsoever, very, very serious, and most definitely custodial sentences usually follow for this type of offence.
But how can you detect it when anyone can legally buy the equipment?
Well, first things first, in terms of detection, we rely very heavily on strong neighbourhood policing within local communities. All of the issues we've discussed tonight, they all take place in local communities, and we all realise, we all know when something's happening which is slightly unusual. Good neighbourhood policing, as we do in the West Midlands, allows us to gain that intelligence, which we clearly then act very robustly with, executing search warrants, arresting, and putting into the criminal justice system.
But with respect, Martin, I mean, we've got people here who are intelligent enough to know that they're not going to mention it to their neighbours. If you're doing it in one house, it's very difficult to detect it, isn't it? So, if you're clever, if you're canny, you're not the kind of person who normally attracts the suspicions of the police. How would you get caught?
Yes, I take your point, first of all, and I've heard certainly in relation to the heat-seeking equipment which we use. Clearly, if it's one room instead of a whole house, then quite naturally it will be more difficult to detect. However, again, people need to realise that criminals do talk, and intelligence does reach the police, not only from neighbourhood policing, but other ways, and we act on this intelligence. I should also point out, it is very, very dangerous. As I say, this is a criminal world, and criminals will know that drugs and potentially cash is being kept in these premises, these dwellings.
At the same time, Martin, we have hydroponic shops and garden centres in some cases that sell the equipment that people can use to grow cannabis. Do we need stiffer legislation to clamp down on hydroponic shops, on what they can sell and who they can sell to?
Well, as Ben correctly pointed out, Adrian, the shops act lawfully, but the reality is, in terms of common sense, shops such as this do sell equipment such as hydroponic equipment, which allows cannabis cultivation.
So do you think they should be clamped down on them? Should there be tougher laws and restrictions on them?
Well, my view is yes, most definitely. But as you say, a great deal of purchasing of hydroponic equipment is done over the internet, so it would have to go hand in hand for me.
That is the end of this piece.